In the late 1950s, the golden age of theatrical cartoons was slowly fading away. Studios were shutting their doors, budgets were disappearing, and for the first time in decades, it looked like animation might simply vanish from screens altogether. But two storytellers with a pencil, a stopwatch, and a risky new idea called television were about to rebuild the entire industry from scratch. When cartoons ruled the big screen. Before cartoons lived in your living room, they lived in movie theaters. Back then, every trip to the cinema followed the same ritual. A newsreel, a cartoon short, and then the main feature. Animation wasn't filler, it was an event. Studios like Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Warner Brothers, and Walt Disney Productions poured enormous time and money into their cartoons, crafting lush, fluid animation that rivaled live-action films in quality. And at MGM, two directors quietly became masters of that craft, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera. Together, they created Tom and Jerry, a simple cat and mouse rivalry that somehow became pure visual comedy. The shorts were so precise and so expressive that they won 7 Academy Awards and played in theaters around the world. At the time, animation didn't feel fragile, it felt unstoppable. But outside those theaters, something new was quietly changing how families experience entertainment. Television changes everything. By the early 1950s, families weren't piling into cars for movie nights anymore. They were staying at home and watching television. The glowing box in the corner of the living room slowly replaced the theater down the street. Box office numbers slipped, studios tightened their belts, and the most expensive department of all, animation, suddenly looked like a luxury they could no longer afford. Then came the unthinkable. In 1957, MGM shut down its animation studio entirely. Just like that, decades of artistry disappeared overnight, and Hanna and Barbera were out of work. To many artists, it felt like the end of an era, as if the golden age of cartoons had simply run out of time. But instead of mourning what they'd lost, Hanna and Barbera did something far more dangerous. They looked toward the future. Reinventing animation for television. There was just one problem. Television couldn't afford Disney-level animation. The budgets were smaller, the schedules were tighter, and the old way of drawing thousands upon thousands of frames simply wouldn't work. So Hanna and Barbera stopped trying to compete with theatrical perfection. Instead, they reinvented the process. They reused backgrounds, held poses longer, and focused on sharp writing, strong timing, and memorable voices rather than endless drawings. The movements became simpler, but the personalities became bigger. What they created wasn't cheaper animation, it was smarter animation. A new style built specifically for television. For the first time, cartoons could be made quickly enough and affordably enough to live inside people's homes every week. Now all they needed were characters audiences could fall in love with. The first breakthrough. In 1958, their new company, Hanna-Barbera Productions, launched the Huckleberry Hound show. This cartoon wasn't flashy or theatrical like the old MGM shorts. Instead, it was warmer, simpler, and more conversational. And somehow, that made it perfect for television. Families tuned in week after week, kids memorized the characters, and when the show won an Emmy, the first ever for an animated series, the entire industry took notice. Cartoons didn't belong only in theaters anymore, they belonged on TV. Soon came more hits like Yogi Bear and Quick Draw McGraw, each one proving the formula worked. Animation wasn't dying, it was evolving. But their biggest gamble was still ahead, and it would change television forever. The show that changed primetime. In 1960, Hanna-Barbera attempted something no one thought was possible, an animated sitcom for adults. the Flintstones, a Stone Age caveman family living suburban lives who used dinosaurs as appliances and faced modern problems. It sounded ridiculous on paper, but on screen, it worked. The show aired at night, not Saturday morning, and quickly became one of the most popular programs on television. For the first time, parents and kids watched a cartoon together. Animation wasn't just for children anymore, it was mainstream entertainment. And with that single success, the rules changed. Cartoons were no longer side dishes, they were primetime. From that moment on, Hanna-Barbera wasn't just surviving, they were defining childhood itself. Building Saturday morning. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Hanna-Barbera's characters filled living rooms across America. The Jetsons imagined the future, Jonny Quest delivered action, and Scooby-Doo Where Are You gave kids mysteries to solve with their friends. Saturday morning slowly became something special for many children across the nation. Cereal bowls on a coffee table, pajamas still on, and cartoons flickering across the living room before the rest of the world had fully woken up. For millions of kids, these characters weren't just drawings on a screen, they were part of childhood. And because Hanna-Barbera found a way to make animation thrive on television, an entire generation grew up believing cartoons belonged in their homes. That foundation made room for what would come next. Channels devoted entirely to animation, new studios willing to take risks, and a medium that would expand far beyond anyone's expectations. Hanna-Barbera didn't just keep cartoons alive, they carried animation through its most fragile moment and gave it time to evolve into everything we love today. From two laid-off animators to the architects of Saturday morning itself, Hanna-Barbera didn't simply adapt to television, they transformed it into animation's new home. The legacy of Hanna-Barbera. Hanna-Barbera's story isn't just about cartoons, it's about two creators who looked at a collapsing animation industry and refused to let it disappear. They took limitations that could have ended animation, such as smaller budgets, tighter schedules, and fewer resources, and turned them into a new creative language. Simple designs became expressive, repetition became rhythm, and television, once seen as a threat to animation, became its lifeline. In doing so, Hanna-Barbera didn't just keep animation alive, they brought it into living rooms, after-school afternoons, and Saturday mornings for generations of children. Their characters didn't need theatrical screens to feel magical, they needed heart, humor, and familiarity. Because sometimes innovation doesn't come from having more, it comes from learning how to do more with less. And that's why Hanna-Barbera's legacy still echoes today. They didn't just save animation, they changed where it lived and who it belonged to. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite Hanna-Barbera show? Do you prefer the Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, or the Jetsons? Share your memories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into animation, video game, and comic book history. See you in the next video!